evolutionary thought. Let's take a look at a brief history of what shaped our thought of evolution today. If we go back to ancient times, ancient Greek, we had Aristotle. Aristotle had this thought of creatures being fixed, that there was no change, and this thought did dominate for hundreds of thousands of years. Kind of going into the 1700s, so that was BC, quite some time has passed. Now we have Mr. James Hutton. He was a geologist. He said processes happened very slowly. So the way that plates moved, the way that a canyon was formed over time was very slow. And in order for these processes to happen very slowly, the Earth has to be very old. Along the same lines was Mr. Charles Lyell. He was also a geologist. He wrote the Principles of Geology. He said that the law of nature does not change. He had this idea of uniformitarianism, basically saying that the way that Earth processes happened today, they did in the 1700s, they did in the ancient times. When Earth was formed, it all happened the same way. So when a volcano erupted, the lava poured in the same manner. When erosion occurred, it occurred at the same rate. In order for these things to happen the same way, the Earth needed to be very old. So between Hutton and Lyell, the thought of the age of the Earth turned to millions of years old instead of thousands of years old. And we now know today that it's billions of years old. Then we have Mr. Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. He was very important in the fact that he was one of the first ones to come up with an idea of change. He did not know about DNA and how traits were passed on. His ideas and thoughts to us are a little bit quirky and a little bit funny and don't really quite make sense. But he was at least revolutionary in to get that idea out there that creatures change over time. His first idea was the law of use and disuse. Basically, if you use it, then it's going to get stronger and bigger. If you don't use it, it's going to be weak and go away. So if we take a look at this picture of the crab, who was using its claw to help fight off other crabs, it got bigger. And then he was able to pass that bigger claw onto its offspring. Again, a little bit quirky because the crab cannot grow a gigantic claw to help it fight, and then it could not pass on that gigantic claw that it gained to its offspring. He also had this idea of acquired traits can be passed on to offspring, and that is, we know that is not true in the fact that I have an acquired trait of pierced ears. So I have a little hole in my earlobe so that way I can dangle fancy things off of my ears, coordinating with my outfits and making me look all that much better. It is beneficial to my life to have pierced ears, so it is a trait that I have acquired that has helped me become better in this world, so I can then pass on the hole in the ear to my offspring, so that way they can also enjoy having the ability to dress up their ears. Again, we know this is not true, but this is one of the things that he had proposed. We also have Thomas Malthus. He was an economist that looked at population growth. He proposed that populations would like to grow forever, and that kind of is the purpose of being here on Earth, is to continue your population. But at some point you're going to get to where there's not enough resources for your population to continue. He also noticed that babies were being born faster than people were dying. So at some point there was going to be a overage of offspring, and there's not going to be enough resource to support those offspring. All of this paved way for Darwin, who seems to be credited with inventing evolution. He didn't invent it, he just brought it to light and wrote a book that was one of the most pivotal books of biology. Let's take a brief look at his history. He was born into a family of revolutionary scientists and medical professionals. He also went to medical school, but decided to kind of drop out, didn't enjoy it, would rather look at plants and animals, then be in medical school. So he went on the voyage of the HMS Beagle around the world. The purpose of the Beagle was to map the coast of South America. It started off in England in 1831. He went down the coast of South America and then came up here and then stopped here at the Galapagos Islands. This is one of the greatest areas that they stopped at for his ideas on natural selection. It was kind of his aha moment, the moment he kind of started this idea of natural selection and noticed quite a change between each of the islands. Because the islands were so close together and had such different climates and different organisms living there, it kind of paved the way for the rest of his ideas. They continued down here to Australia, through Southeast Asia, down the tip of Africa, kind of back over to South America, and then back up here to England. They ended in 1836, so 5-year voyage. The Galapagos, like I said, was one of the most pivotal places that Darwin visited. You can see there is a cluster of islands of all different sizes. They had all different environments there and had very different organisms on each island. One thing he noticed were the turtles, or the tortoises. There is one species of tortoise, but many variations of that tortoise depending on the food available in that area. There are some with flatter shells and longer necks to be able to reach for their food, and there's some with more domed shells and shorter necks in order to kind of get underneath brambles to get their food. He also noticed the finches. If you want to go see the collection of finches Darwin collected, they are at the Harvard Natural History Museum in Cambridge. He noticed that these birds were similar and related, but yet looked different according to what they ate. So their beaks could have been, short, sharp, and pointy to get into a cactus in order to pull out a bug, or can be large in order to crack a nut. Depending on what food was available would dictate what their beaks look like. So after his 5-year voyage, he came home, started to write a little bit here and there about his findings. He wrote many other papers on geology and kind of became known for other findings on geology. He also wrote about nature in different ways. He married his cousin. He had 10 kids, had a dog named Saphos. He then published On the Origin of Species, but didn't publish it for 20 years. When Wallace, another scientist, prompted him to write his On the Origin of Species, because Wallace sent him a paper very similar to his own ideas and kind of that said, hey, I kind of want to get my name on this and not have Wallace taking all the credit, and he got to work on the Origin of Species. If we take a look at natural selection is an organism that has traits that allows them to survive and leave more offspring. So if we look at the struggle for existence or competition, organisms will compete for food, they'll compete for water, space, light, mates. Anything that they need to share that is maybe limited is going to be competed for. The one that wins has the traits that allows it to win, and then can pass on those traits by having more offspring than the one that didn't win that competition. We have variation and adaptation.